Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our series on multilingualism, multiculturalism. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Halina Majer, who was actually a part of this project and was working on it for the past 2 years. Hello, Halina. Nice to have you today.
Hello, and good to see you. Good to join you in this series of talks.
Halina, what was your job exactly? I mean, how were you involved in the project? What were you responsible for?
Right, I was mostly involved in one of the intellectual outputs, whatever way you put it. The one which was based on preparing a repository of activities, but we. As you remember, we divided this into some activities which were meant for parents to practice with children at home. And well, this is what the girls in Multiclub in Krakow did. And what we did here, which you participated in, and some more colleagues, we looked at this from the point of view of the teachers or educators, as we call them, because it doesn't have to be a teacher, because it doesn't have to be a school context. It's more likely to be this multilingual club context, but still, we assume that we have a person who's responsible for, well, not perhaps teaching, but who's in charge of these language activities being applied, being somehow, well, practiced with both children and their parents. And the idea was, well, actually, I honestly think I was very pleased with what we came up with, because I believe in the theory behind it. I strongly believe in it, that we are able to somehow develop this additive bilingualism in these kids. That is, the child continues to develop the first language background, the first language culture, while at the same time becoming fluent and becoming proficient in the second language. Right. And we don't want it to become the kind of subtractive bilingualism, which means learning another language, learning the new language, the second language, at the expense of the first language. So this was the main idea of I would say, of the whole project, and this was the main idea of what we wanted to do in the classrooms or in those multilingual clubs, which could be, I suppose, a lot of these activities can be actually used, applied by teachers. If they have multilingual children, bilingual children, if they have children coming from migrant children in their classrooms, a lot of them can be also exploited. And yeah, the idea was to prepare a selection of these activities for different age groups, for different levels, for different language skills. And I would like to stress one thing there, because this additive bilingualism, which we are aiming for very strongly, this also means literacy in both languages. And we also, because it's not like we don't want this just, heritage language learning, just picking up bits of the native language at home, just spoken language. We would like them to be literate in both languages. And a lot of our activities for those slightly older children, the slightly older age group, they were based on reading and writing as well.
So what you're saying is that everybody can use this. It doesn't have to be a multilingual family, right? Because you're an academic, how would you describe what is bilingualism from an academic point of view?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question, because because there are many definitions, as you are aware of. For some people, bilingual means knowing two languages, well, equal let's say, equal proportion and being absolutely, I would say, being able to use both languages equally well in all situations, which is not realistic. Let's face it. It doesn't happen, because always one language will prevail in some situations, the other language will prevail in other situations, and for a lot of people it means just this fairly equal and proportional use of both languages. For a lot of people, also, being bilingual just means being able to communicate successfully in more than one language, which is a definition that I would like to support, because that's what when we teach at schools, we don't aim at producing perfect bilinguals, although maybe some parents have those maybe unrealistic expectations, and some teachers have to somehow face them and explain to the teachers that that's not possible, that we will not produce perfect bilinguals, let's say compound bilinguals, when we have something like 2 hours per week, which is somehow squeezed into other school subjects. So I would say, yeah, people who can communicate in more than one language, and this is attainable. I think this is feasible. We can do it when teaching at school, and if we are supported by parents at home, well, the results can be really quite good.
I like that very much, what you said, that we are supported by teachers, because we're living in times where more and more parents are trying to get involved in the teaching process, and they are trying to make the teacher do certain things. I mean, because you teach future teachers. What are the biggest problems of those students when they go into the classroom environment? How do they react?
That's what most teachers say. Our graduate students are mostly teachers, practicing teachers, in-service teachers, who are being trained to get, let's say, higher qualifications. But I would say 90% of them have already had a lot of experience as teachers. And there's this one thing that they all keep saying: it's fine, I can deal with the children, I can deal with the kids, it's the parents. Well, the real problem is the parents who are difficult to deal with, sometimes with these unrealistic expectations. Okay, maybe before we, let's finish, I would like to add just one more thing about parents and becoming bilingual. I'm talking about this natural bilingualism, because, you know, what we dealt with in our project was a perfectly natural, these were natural situations, children who come from foreign families, or who come from mixed families with one parent speaking one language, the other parent speaking another language, or both parents being migrants, right, and speaking a language different than the language of the society where the child is growing in. And this is fine. I mean, this is perfectly natural. It's natural for the child to have a different language at home and a different language at school, and children have no problems with that. I think kids are very flexible here, and they just accept it as a normal situation. They don't have a problem with that. And also, I think the situation with mixed marriages, right? When there is this one parent, one language. Okay, great, this works. What I have a problem with, and just talking about our students, is this so-called artificial bilingualism. You know what I mean? The non-native bilingualism, something that I have a feeling is becoming fashionable. It's becoming more and more common. This idea that okay, we'll just bring up our child to be bilingual,
right?
And this attempt to speak, okay, to give the child a second language which is neither of the parents' native language.
I understand.
This results in this one person, one language method when one of the parents pretends as if to be a foreigner and addresses the child in a foreign language, or both parents sometimes do it. They speak a foreign language. But I find it, honestly, I don't know what you think about it. Honestly, I find it to be very weird. I find it strange. I find it very unnatural. And I find it a bit worrying. And I'm mentioning it because I've had a lot of students, teachers, who have young children, and they say, oh, what do you think about it? I'm planning on speaking English only to my child. To which my question usually is, but why? Why would you do that? And there's usually confusion, and they say, oh, well, to give the child the opportunities to grow up bilingual. And just to add an anecdote, well, you know my family situation,
Yes.
right? My husband is also an English teaching specialist, and we're both linguists. We're both interested in psycholinguistics and language teaching. And I remember when our sons were younger, I heard this question that so many times: do you speak English to your children? I said,
Exactly.
no, of course we don't speak English to our children. Why should we? Oh, because it would be, so much better for them. Well, just to...
Exactly. I was asked the same question. I was asked the same question when my son was born. And am I speaking English to my child? And I asked the same question. Why should I? It's unnatural.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a different environment, so I'm taking my example, when I was in a different environment, meaning Canada, it was only natural for me to use English because everybody outside used English. But right now...
Oh, yes, of course. You met other kids, you went to play school, maybe, exactly. I don't know. But at home, I suppose, at home with your parents, I suppose.
We spoke Polish. I tried sometimes to force my parents to speak English, and they were forcing me to speak Polish. So there was this balance. So at home, I had Polish.
You can do it for fun, I suppose. You can do it for fun. But pretending you're a foreigner, I tried to imagine what it would be like. And I thought, well, there's the linguistic development. It's not limited to language, right? It goes together with emotions, with emotional bonds, a lot of identity.
Exactly,
identity problems, and then also I can't imagine, right, being affectionate with my child in a foreign language, assuming that there are different situations, right? The child is crying, the child is unhappy, you have to somehow comfort him, or sometimes the child is being naughty and you have to reprimand him. Can you do it in a foreign language?
It would be unnatural. It would be unnatural for me.
Very strange. Also, this input that the child would be getting, I suppose, would be far from he'd be getting in this language. I mean, if you were acquiring this language naturally, because there is this. Okay, maybe I shouldn't use the word motherese because it's gender from the gender point of view, it's doubtful. But a caretaker talk. Right? We all have this ability to adjust our language. We all have this ability to use the so-called simplified register. We don't think about it. We do it automatically in our native language. We simplify our native language when talking to children, when talking to foreigners as well. So we know how to do it. I couldn't do it in a foreign language. I would have to think twice. Okay. So when I try to reason with my eager students, teachers, so willing, so motivated and enthusiastic, I will only speak English to my child. And I start talking about, why it doesn't. No, I don't try to convince them because I know they can't be convinced. That's my experience. That whenever I tried, they I know they will do it anyway.
Right.
No matter what I tell them, they will do it anyway because they are so motivated. But one of the arguments that I heard was, but you said yourself, they told me, you said yourself during our classes that children are so good at picking up pronunciation. And then I was on the verge of saying several times, I never said it, but I was on the verge of saying, your pronunciation is just so bad. Your pronunciation, your English pronunciation is so far from native. So why don't you just, I don't know, allow the child to listen to recordings in English, listen to native speakers? Why
Exactly.
not? Right?
Exactly.
So I find this is a funny topic.
I know, yeah, I exactly know what you're talking about. And I remember everybody, including some family members, asking me why I'm not doing this with my son. And that was the answer, because it is unnatural. Now, from a perspective, I think that was a good choice. Because so I would not recommend doing this because, again, you feel you're giving the child something, but not really. It hasn't been proven that you will be a bilingual.
And even you know, if you remember a very interesting lecture by Sonia Schramek-Krantz during our conference, who was talking about bilingualism, and I read a paper by her about this. I think she called it non-native bilingualism, and she herself, she's more enthusiastic about it than we are, than I am, than you are maybe. But she also mentioned that this is a delicate issue, and this is a delicate and controversial issue. Even being, you know, generally a supporter of the idea, she said, okay, let's be careful. And that's the advice that if I were asked, you know, that's the advice that I would like to give parents, overzealous, over-enthusiastic parents who are really motivated and want the best for their kids, I'm sure. Just before you start experimenting with your child's linguistic, but also cognitive development, emotional development, just think twice. Just be careful. Think twice.
Be careful.
And they will do fine. I mean, my kids are they have ended up pretty multilingual anyway, right?
Exactly. Everything will come its course. You're not going to create a natural bilingual by simply putting him in or her in a very artificial environment. You know, I was also wondering what you think if it's difficult for multicultural kids living in a monoculture like Poland, how much of their original culture and language can they actually maintain? Because we're not as multicultural as Britain, as the United States. We're more mono here. And I think it's very difficult for these children to.
It must be difficult for them. But what we can do and what we should do, I suppose, is offer as many courses for teachers as possible, as many courses, as many materials as the ones we have produced during our project, and making them aware and making them acquainted with not only these materials, but also the theory behind it and all the advantages of bilingualism and making them more tolerant. I'm sure this helps. In one of the previous editions of these projects about multilingualism, I remember there was a manual for teachers, which gave a lot of advice of how to welcome a foreign child and what to do, how to treat the foreign child, the migrant child, in order to make it easier for him or her. And it was, those were very practical things, very good practical advice, like learning the names and how they're pronounced, and asking how they are called by family members, and giving the child this advantage of, you know, the silent periods of staying silent, not forcing the child, giving them time. A lot of practical advice, very, I would say, professional and very reasonable, and stressing this empathy, that maybe, maybe some of our teachers lack, maybe not because they are not empathic people, but maybe because they lack the knowledge, they lack the background. So maybe, the more courses, the more workshops dealing with this, the better. I hope, I think it's improving. I think there are more and more of these foreign children. And when I asked my graduate students, my teachers, when I tried to make them interested, because they participated in one of our, when we did this pre-testing of some of our activities, I invited some of my students, my graduate students who are teachers, to participate in this workshop, and then we had an online discussion. We had sort of online platform discussion forum, discussion group, and I was surprised because most of them said that they had experience. That was the topic was not entirely new for them.
That's good.
So I was pleasantly surprised that they were more familiar with the situation than I had expected they would be. I don't know. And you also said that in your son's class.
Yes. We have in my son's class, the father is Italian, the mother is Polish, so the child speaks both Italian and Polish at the same time. We have another friend. He has another friend here. His mother is Japanese and his father is Polish. So they speak. He actually speaks 3 languages because the parents communicate in English. He communicates with his mother in Japanese, and he communicates with his father in Polish. And it's interesting watching him develop, because when he was younger, he was very much connected with the Japanese culture, and he called himself Japanese. But now he's 13, 14, and he's rejected his Japanese heritage, and he says, I am Polish. Don't call me Japanese Polish, call me Polish, which causes the grandparents not to be happy. So this is a very interesting way in which we're observing in this globalized world things that, 20, 40, 50 years ago were uncommon in Poland.
But it's fascinating, really. It's fascinating to watch the development of these children, and it's great that it's happening. And I was really very pleasantly surprised at how teachers are, on the one hand, already familiar. A lot of them are. On the other hand, they are willing to find out.
That's good. That's a positive
quite
sign.
enthusiastic to read the manual, to find what the advice is, to get some information about how to, what they can do in order to help these children feel at home. So
Exactly.
That's
And
good. I think it's becoming better.
This is where we come to the third and probably the most important part: lockdown, online learning. What kind of dangers or maybe advantages do you see of online learning, or do you think it's going to make things difficult and different?
For me, it was very difficult at the beginning, I must say, because as you remember, it happened overnight, and we had to change immediately our attitudes. I was hoping that I would never have to do it, but then overnight, as I said, I had to learn it. It was, but I would like to, what I would like to point out is it's probably very different with students who are grown up people. It must have been very, very difficult with teaching children, especially young children. So I think it's good that the children at least have returned to school. Hopefully it will remain like that. With students, so I can't imagine how it was possible, how it could have been possible to conduct, let's say, English lessons online with, let's say, first graders, second graders. No, impossible, just totally impossible. Even with students, we all had this feeling, when I talk to my colleagues, we all have this feeling that even though we try hard, we try harder than we used to, but the results are not as good as they could have been if I could just go to the classroom and distribute the materials and put the
Have control over
students in
everything.
pairs and groups and have them do something together and have this contact. So even with the grown-ups, even with students, it was difficult, and with children I can't imagine how very difficult it must have been. Like for me, the worst thing, let me tell you, I don't know if you experienced the same thing. The worst thing for me was when students refused to switch on their camera.
Yes.
And I asked them, please, I want to see you. I would like to at least pretend, okay, that we're doing it as we used to do, that we have a group, that we have a discussion. It worked fine with the seminar groups because they were small groups. It worked fine if I had something like 7, 8 people in the group. So I, let's say, forced them to do it. But with larger groups, when I could see those, black rectangles on the screen, and I had a strange feeling, am I talking to people, or are they there, or have they just logged in and left? Maybe they're not there. Maybe they're recording it and later they will listen to it and make fun of me. I don't know what they'll do with it. Maybe they're there, maybe they're not there, maybe they're listening, maybe they're not. So I asked them several times, please, let me see your faces. No way. It was difficult. So I would rather have them in the classroom, but can I see any advantages? I talked to one of our friends, Agnieszka, who teaches literature, and she said that at the university she was forced to record the lectures because simply the groups were too large to have the lectures online at the same time, sort of. And she was asked to record the lectures, and the students could listen to them whenever they wanted. So this probably is kind of an advantage for a student, right? When they have a lecture and they can listen to it, I don't know, twice, or stop it and write something down or listen again. But then the results during the exam were much worse than she had expected.
Exactly. That's why I'm worried about these young kids right now. I know they're digital natives, that they live on their phones and they live on YouTube and all different applications. But if we're talking about maintaining cultural heritage, linguistic heritage, I'm interested in how somebody wants to do this over the internet, because maybe I'm too old. Maybe we're the older generation and we're still thinking in a different way.
Don't talk about the older generation, because you're the young generation.
We're still the young generation, but we were brought up on completely different ideals in a different world. And maybe for us, it's harder to try to be more, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to use the word creative, but more adaptable to the current situation. Because we still believe that contact is extremely important, and that certain things might be superficial. So I don't know if online teaching of a 10-year-old child is a good idea, or what results that will produce in the future. We will probably know in 10 to 15 years what type of young people have grown up. And
it's very it very much depends on how the teachers approached it, because even online, what I've heard from parents who have 10-year-old children at school, and they said, okay, some teachers went out of their way. They appeared on the screen, they did interesting things, they showed films, and they managed to maintain this sort of group feeling. While a lot of other teachers just sent, they just sent tasks to be solved and then sent back, and they didn't even care too much about correcting them. So it's very, as usual, as always, right? As in the classroom, it also depends on how the teachers approach it. But you're right, we'll know we will not know immediately. But even if you ask the learners themselves, if you ask students what they think, if you ask children what they think, I think they are extremely confused. Because on the one hand, students say, oh no, we miss students' life, we would like to meet, we would like to see our friends, we would like to have this real conversations with our teachers, with our friends. On the other hand, a lot of them at the university, I don't know if you've heard the English department, they were asked to turn up, physically in the classroom for an exam, and they refused. And they said, no, we're not doing it. We don't want to. And they complained to the dean. So it's, on the one hand, I think they are confused as well. And I wouldn't blame them. We are all confused.
We are all confused.
We didn't expect it. So if students are confused, I suppose younger children are even more confused.
And I think the most important thing you said is that feeling of inclusion, inclusiveness, and that being part of something, is most important. Belonging. And that's what European core values are, belonging together. So I think that we should also, another part. So Halina, thank you very much. It was wonderful talking to you. You said a ton of interesting things. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this little conversation, and remember, you can be bilingual too. Hello and welcome to this short series of webinars. Today I have a special guest for you, Mr. John Crust, with whom we'll be talking about multiculturalism, interculturalism, and why it's important that we maintain our cultural heritage. Hi, John. Thanks, and welcome to this webinar.
Glad to join you.
John, you've been around the world. You've lived in many different places. You've done so many different things with your life. What's your experience with how do you deal with that ever-changing a situation where you go to one place, you have to change your behavior, and you have to adapt to a new culture? What was that like for you during your travels?
It can be difficult, but it's also very rewarding. I remember when I first came to Poland, I didn't know anything about the city, Łódź, but I was excited. I had a full-time university teaching job, and I was all excited. This was something I wanted to do. And I took the plunge. Not everybody can do that, of course, but I decided to do this. I didn't speak a word of Polish, but I was a newspaper reporter in Los Angeles. I'd worked in the Black and Latino communities. I covered the violence there. I got to know these cultures. I was a volunteer in the US Peace Corps. So I suppose I was lucky. I had a background being in other cultures. Yes, it can be difficult, even frustrating, but you also grow, and I think you become a better person, and you see a bigger picture of the world.
What was the most embarrassing or the weirdest thing that happened when you had to adapt to a new culture? Do you remember anything that was absurd or you found very difficult to get used to?
Well, in Polish culture, I'm trying to think. There are incidents, of course. I've come to love Polish culture. I feel very Polish now. I guess, well, going through the checkout counter at a supermarket. And in the United States or Canada, you give a 100 zloty bill, and they just give you the change. Here, it's not quite so simple. They'll ask you, well, do you have this change? And that's fine, but you could have people in front of you, and there will be an I laugh at this and I love it now because it's so much part of my Polish culture. You have like this major mathematical equation, and the clerk and the customer, they're trying to figure out, okay, do you have this many grosze and do you have this? Okay, we're getting close. And sometimes you're just anxious to get out that checkout line. And this seems to be going on for a while, trying to solve this mathematical equation with the coins.
I know what you're talking about. I mean, that frustrates me a bit too. You're a cosmopolitan, actually, although you hold an American passport. How much of American culture as opposed to world culture is there in you? I mean, how would you classify yourself?
I think this is a challenge when you live abroad. I'm both Canadian and American. I feel, as I say, I feel very Polish now. When I went back to Canada, my dad was getting on in age and not doing well, so I tried going back. It was very difficult readjusting. I felt like a Polish immigrant, and I met Poles in Winnipeg, Canada, and we would start speaking. Mówię tylko po polsku. I remember I was working at a bookstore, and there was this elderly gentleman, a grandfather, and he didn't speak any English, and he spoke some Polish, and I overheard him, and I said, "Czy pan mówi po polsku?" This big grin on his face. He was so happy to be able to speak Polish. So it is a challenge if you've lived abroad. Okay, where do you belong now? Going back, I felt a bit in exile. And I think more and more people are experiencing this as they go abroad to work in other countries. I would say for the most part, it's still an advantage being exposed to all these different cultures, seeing the world. But it can be frustrating. Okay, where am I from? Where do I belong?
Oh,
and more
I
and more
agree.
people find themselves in that situation.
Oh, I agree. I remember going through that phase when I was 10 years old, when I came from Canada here, and I didn't belong. When I got used to being here, when I went back to Canada for my PhD, I felt I didn't belong there anymore. Where's my Canada? So all my life I've been saying, I'm from these two cultures, I can juggle them, and then I went there and the world moved on, and it wasn't my Canada anymore. So
Exactly.
that's the thing that but it is, as you said, it is good to have multicultural societies, because it gives you the possibility to on a micro scale experience that otherness, that people have different views, that people eat different things, they behave in different ways, and it's okay, because that's the thing that I loved about Canada. It was the melting pot, that you never knew who you were going to meet.
Interestingly, I seem to connect very well with the immigrants. When I went back to Winnipeg, I was living in the inner city, and you'd have Muslims with their hijabs, First Nations peoples, Africans. I loved it. I'd go to the suburb where I grew up, see my brother, my niece. I remember once I'm watching my niece play soccer, what you call football here. I remember mentioning to my brother, gee, it seems so white. I could never live there anymore. I love that mix, that international mix. And I go back to my other world in Winnipeg, this immigrant, First Nations, non-white mix. And I loved it. So it does change you. And I think you do realize that you've also been very lucky. Having lived in Łódź, I've also lived in Israel, Czech Republic, Albania, China, Los Angeles. You realize that there's so many different kinds of educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and I can see how I've really grown. and maybe more of a citizen of the world.
So when we have situations where a child has a mixed parentage, so let's say the mother is Polish while the father is, I don't know, French, and you grow up with these two cultures at home and the two languages at home, would in your opinion, that be beneficial to maintaining those cultures so that the child can have the best of both worlds and feel good both as a friend?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had students, Polish students with mixed cultural backgrounds, end up going to Britain, and then they decide to come back here for university. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity, being bilingual, Polish English, being able to come back here, growing up in London or wherever in Britain. It's so much more of an enriching experience. Now, of course, not everybody's in that situation. I think everybody's situation is unique and special. But I think in the past where a child might feel a little ashamed, I would think a child coming from those mixed backgrounds should feel proud of that, because you've got a foot in two different worlds that help shape you and make you who you are, and might possibly open up more doors in the job market.
That's one thing.
University opportunities.
Absolutely. And the fact that you already are from a mixed background, I think it makes you much more open to even more backgrounds, because you feel that you also are not one, you're part of everybody. So in this case, if we look at European countries like France or Germany, which are very much multicultural, Poland is becoming step by step, but we're still absorbing it. Do you think what I'm trying to say is, do you see any threats connected with changes that are happening in the world right now, and how that might affect the way that we look at people of different cultures? And I'm not referring to the president currently in the White House.
The world is changing very fast. Technology, demographics. California right now, and I think possibly Nevada, maybe a few other states, it's not accurate to use the term minority anymore, because the whites are now the minority. I think most open-minded, educated people have no problem with that. Everybody's the same. They want the best for their kids, good schools, good health system. You will have some who seem to have this worry about a white culture, whatever that might mean. I've never been able to understand that. Research shows that when it comes to productivity, developing new ideas, it's good business to have that diverse, multicultural mix. And we're also talking about sexual orientation. Everybody together, they see things differently. I think what's really exciting is we do have a younger generation, and growing up with social media and common tastes in music, I'm very excited. And when I see the Black Lives Matter protests in America, also Canada, also in Europe, of course, there's no excuse for the violence or the looting, and it should be emphasized. Research shows that that has been a minority of incidents. The vast majority of these protests have been peaceful, and you've seen some incredible leadership among young people, teenagers, kids still in high school. And when you see that leadership, and when you take a look at some of our challenges today, such as global warming, climate change, other issues, I'm inspired by these young people, and I'm feeling really good. And I think they can bring some fresh blood. And many of them, most of them maybe, are seeing beyond skin color. And I'd like to emphasize one thing. I spent a year teaching at an inner city high school in Los Angeles, one of the toughest schools. Non-white, we had a few white teachers, The kids were all black and Latino. Maybe there was one white kid, I can't remember. What was very interesting was, I think within a week or two, I didn't see skin color anymore. These are my kids. And I remember how they'd say they talk ghetto, they dress ghetto. Those were their words. But they were cool. A lot of them came from tough backgrounds. Some of them were in gangs, certainly lived in gang neighborhoods. Some of the kids already were young parents. But I found it fascinating that I loved their culture, that urban culture, and just that when you're in that cultural mix, you don't see that skin color anymore. You don't really see that cultural difference. These are my people, my kids, and I would do anything for them.
I mean,
And so
that's absolutely true.
And I think people who try to avoid certain circles, they're only cheating themselves. Sure, it can be scary, but I was once surrounded by 20 black gang members in a park in Los Angeles. I was a reporter. My photographer's in his car and he's panicking, freaking out. And I've always thought, how was it that I didn't get scared? And I'm sure some of them were armed, but I just stood my ground. I showed respect. I listened to them. I can't remember the details, but there's probably a killing, and I wanted to hear what they had to say about that gang killing. If I had shown fear, now that I reflect on it, I think I can understand if I showed fear, I was seeing them as less than human or less than me. But by not showing that fear, standing my ground, looking at them in the eye, listening and showing respect, they listened and showed respect to me.
That's an interesting story, yeah.
And I think people need to overcome the fear of the unknown, get out of that comfort zone, meet these people, or at least don't avoid them. And you might actually learn something special from these cultures.
So what about this internet culture? I know you're not a fan of social media. I know you're not a fan of it. Personally, I don't know where I stand on it. Sometimes I use it just for fun. Sometimes I use it for finding what's going on with my friends or what's happening around the world. But I'm not really that into living in social media and having the communication channel going into the internet, especially now in COVID, when we went online. How was that experience for you when you had to communicate online?
I think I needed that push. And while it was a challenge at times, and I would still prefer being physically in the classroom, I think this is also another culture. And we have to respect people who thrive on it. We have to respect people who are not used to it and are a bit uncertain about it. We had a colleague once who pushed this Facebook approach in teaching a practical English course. And I think the person didn't realize, and maybe a lot of us didn't realize it either, that this was another culture being forced on us. But when you go slow, you try to understand it, it does have its place. And I've been impressed with, again, a lot of young people. There is this young man, 22 years old, from Belarus. He graduated from a film school, I believe in Warsaw, and the New York Times had a profile on him, 22, and he's using social media to help with this effort to remove their dictator in Belarus. And I thought, that's so admirable. This kid is showing such leadership and maturity, and he's using this tool to help bring a better life to his people in his country. So social media definitely has a place, and someone like me, I need to respect it, Of course, the people who live and breathe social media also need to respect where I come from. I still believe in the legacy press. I think together we've got an amazing future when harnessing it and using it in a responsible way with the right balance.
Because I absolutely agree. It's the balance and the use of the tool, right? If you misuse the tool, you don't have to blame the nail for being wrong if you use the hammer wrong and the nail is crooked, like beaten into the wall. So of course, social media and everything, the internet can be misused. But now when we were all pushed at least to lockdown for about 2 months, people lost, that connection to each other. Did that affect you in any way, that you couldn't go out and see the people you wanted to on a regular basis?
I don't think it affected me as much as some people, partly because I was kept busy as an instructor. Maybe I'm a bit of an introvert at times. I'm doing my research, I'm working on a book project, I'm writing. So I personally didn't feel I suffered any kind of depression or anything, while I know some people have experienced that. What is interesting is that I think a lot of people were talking about this great future, education online and all kinds of other great things online. And while I think there's certainly a place for some of that, on the whole, we've rediscovered the importance of that human contact. Being in a coffee house, being in a pub, just being with people, having some great conversation in person. And I'm not sure if people are going to just accept all this digital technology pushed on them the way they were until the pandemic hit. We need to have that physical contact.
Yes, absolutely. And from a teacher experience, I mean, we went through this. We know how much we lost over the last couple of months. And today I actually met my students on campus for the first time since the lockdown. I asked them to come over and say, okay, we'll discuss how this is going to look like in the upcoming months. We were still much apart from each other, but it was great seeing them. And I saw that they were happy that they could come back and have that. So in some sense, we will never be capable of pushing everything online. The human spirit cannot be pushed online. And I think that's culturally universal. Many people ask the question if there was different cultural approaches to COVID and the lockdown, but I think it was all very universal, that we all, depending on skin color, on cultural background, I think we all took it the same way, that it showed that we're not that different after all.
There are some students who felt they benefited, and I've seen articles in the New York Times where maybe some slow learners actually found it was better being online. And I can respect that. But for the most part, I think students of all ages, they want to be back in the classroom, and they're terribly disappointed if they're going to have to be online.
So what's your prediction for the upcoming months? Will we be going back online?
I don't think anybody knows. The Prime Minister in Canada addressed the country, and he's saying the next few months are going to be bleak. COVID is growing. It's growing in parts of Europe. I'm an optimist. We are going to get through this. But I think we need to be careful, because we've seen public schools and universities open in the US, and within a week they were shut down again. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, not knowing. Yeah, no, well, that's the worst part, not knowing. But again, we can't predict the future. We just have to react accordingly in these situations. So I'm thinking, about these immigrants who've just arrived, let's say, to Europe pre-COVID. They haven't adjusted yet to much of the culture. And now they went on lockdown. And with this cultural shock in place and getting to know the new reality in which they're in, I can't imagine what it was for them, where they had just left their place of origin came to the world where it's new and they got shut down. That must have had some effect on them.
Absolutely, because at least where I come from in Canada, we do have some very good immigration outreach programs. Religious groups, churches have done a lot of great work. But, and I've never been an immigrant, coming here as an English teacher is not exactly the same thing. There are similarities, but also big differences. I think some of them could be feeling lost, and some of them have actually experienced tragedy. There's a sad story out of Michigan. Immigrants from Iraq, they're Christian immigrants. I think there are 3 children. This was in the Washington Post, and they range in age from 10 to 18 or 20 years old. They'd lived in this place in Michigan, it might have been a suburb of Detroit, for a few years, but both parents died within a few days of each other of COVID.
Oh.
So now you've got these immigrant kids, and they're on their own. Fortunately, there are some people trying to help them, but this is the worst case scenario where you're an immigrant and all of a sudden your parents are gone. Oh, the Mexican border, children who've been separated from their parents and they may never see their parents again. Many Americans are absolutely furious that this is allowed to happen. Other Americans are saying, well, they entered illegally, they're a problem. I cannot imagine a child never seeing their parent again, but this is the reality. And I'm sure similar things, hopefully not that extreme, but similar things are happening here in Europe.
So, as you said, you were above all in the Peace Corps. So you've seen both the good and the bad. What kind of life lessons has this, your internationalism or cosmopolitanism, given you?
I guess what's really frustrating is that I've always felt, okay, you get this education and everybody would feel this way. But there are some people who are very anti-immigrant. And I guess I'm not sure, how do I talk to such people? And I want to be clear, I don't want to see such people as an enemy when we're talking about pro-Trump or anti-Trump people. It's important to emphasize that people who support Donald Trump, many of them have been terribly hurt. They're suffering economically, they've lost their jobs. Farmer suicides are skyrocketing. People who once had solid union jobs, they can barely find something that pays more than minimum wage. And so you've got a politician, and also here in Europe, politicians who know how to say what some people want to hear and how to manipulate things. So if someone disagrees with you politically, that's still a brother or sister American or brother or sister Pole. And I think we should remember that. But because I am used to being around different cultures, and I believe immigration is important for most countries, finding a way to have that discussion, that is a challenge. And I find it difficult that some people can remain closed-minded. I'm not sure if I'm wording this correctly, but how to address it without polarizing ourselves. And a great example would be, we just recently had the Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who just died from the US Supreme Court. And she was very good friends with the Justice, Anthony Scalia was his name?
Anthony Scalia.
He was conservative, she's liberal. And yet they go to the opera together, they went out together, they were like brother and sister. And there have been commentaries what's happened to our society, whether we're in Poland or America, wherever, why can't a conservative and a liberal still be friends and just see things a little differently, but not be on the verge of a civil war with each other?
And those are the words of a true multicultural person, a man of the world, you know that because by discovering that, you learn to appreciate certain things. So from my point of view, the fact that I've also traveled, I'm a huge fan of intercultural societies because they build me as a person. It's easy for me to have a conversation with anyone who's different per cultural difference or nationality difference because I'm so interested in this. So I think that the best thing that comes from an intercultural upbringing, bilingualism, multilingualism, whatever we're going to call it at this point, is the fact that you have the skill to appreciate that otherness and be the conservative and be the liberal at the same time and put these things aside and connect easily. Because from the beginning, you have to juggle, just like our multilingual, or multiracial, multinational families, they have to juggle around the mother's tradition, the father's tradition, et cetera, and the child learns to balance that out. So that gives him later in life a lot of these skills to also balance other cultures. So I think that this is the only way that we can move forward in order to at least, okay, let's move on and let's talk to each other. And I think that these people who have remained non-monocultural, who have left the country, who have traveled, who have visited, who have multinational friends, they easily more appreciate differences as opposed to those which build the brick wall around themselves and say, no, this is mine, do not enter. You are not welcome in my country. And that's...
I can give you another example. I had a wonderful opportunity to teach. I was an English teacher at a kids camp in Siberia. The opportunity came up and I thought, when would I have a chance to go to Siberia? 5 nights on the Trans-Siberian Railway from Moscow to a place, well, to Chita, and the camp was out of Chita, outside Chita. And I don't know what I was expecting, but I guess I was, of course, completely ignorant. But I'm meeting these teenagers who are like Polish, Canadian, or American teenagers. I remember one t-shirt, "Question Authority," I think it said, which I thought was totally cool. The dancing, I learned about K-pop. And when I hear people make comments about Russia in the framework of Putin, I think of my kids at that camp. And these were kids. And of course, many of them did not support Putin. Some of them made fun of Putin. So when we think about some common enemy or who we perceive as a common enemy, one of the greatest lessons I learned was that the people aren't necessarily representative of the government and vice versa.
Exactly. It's those negative stereotypes that we always take from the politicians or from some fake news social media elements. Just go there, experience it. You'll find out that the people, that's something completely different than the image that you have in your head that has been inserted there. And maybe then our fear of immigrants, our fear of people coming in might just go away, because let's just discover these people that can have real cool things to say and do. And that's why whenever I go abroad, everybody, what hurts me is that I have McDonald's and Starbucks everywhere. And if I go to Kenya, for example, and I know I don't want this. I want something that's original, that comes from here. That's the first thing I look for, right? A real, so go where the locals go. And then follow the locals, and that's the great thing. Okay, John, thank you for coming on today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for listening and hope you remain multilingual and multicultural.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final episode of this webinar concerning multiculturalism, multilingualism, teaching, and how teaching was affected during the pandemic. I would like to welcome Mr. Jacek Rózga, a former student of mine.
Hello.
who is
Yes,
also
indeed.
a teacher teaching right now in primary in a primary school. Jacek, so first of all, obvious question: pandemic. How has that affected schools?
Well, generally, first of all, we had lockdown, so it affected schools in such a way that children and students did not go to schools personally or in reality. So that was the problem. Schools as buildings were functioning, but they were not functioning properly because the students were at home. And that was the beginning of our story with the lockdown, because firstly, for a week, there were no classes whatsoever, so students had nothing to do, so they were just treating lockdown as kind of holiday. And then only later the Ministry of Education decided to have some kind of online lesson, and then it just began. So we can say that it affected schools in such a way that we had to convert ourselves into teaching online.
Okay, and what kind of tools were you guys using to teach online?
Well, generally the thing is that nobody knew what tools to use, so it was a quick brainstorming session, and we decided in the school to use the Zoom platform because somebody said that it's a good venue of online organization of lessons, and that was basically this. And then because we work in a school in which we have Librus, which is a system for grading students and correspondence with parents, we decided to write emails via the system, and this is how it went. Although, of course, after some time, it turned out that Google has some kind of tool for working online. It's called Google Classroom, and I started even using it a little bit. And there's Teams, but we didn't use Teams. So basically, in our school, we just used Zoom and Librus.
And did it work? And did it work? Were the children engaged? Did they take part actively?
Actually, I have to say that when it comes to English lessons, they did take part actively, because it turned out that pandemic had a positive aspect. The students were supposed to speak more because it was very difficult to do all the basic activities, you know, activity 1, 2, 3 from the book. So we had to convert our teaching into more speaking, and that was a positive outcome of the thing. There were, of course, problems, but myself, I did realize what I planned to do. So actually, I achieved all the goals I planned in September. So I covered all the material, and basically I did what I was supposed to do with good results, because my students of 8th grade passed the exam with flying colors. So generally, I'm very happy about that.
Well, congratulations. What do you think about online materials? You know, like pages which are, you know, constructed in such a way to, you know, for testing, listening. So using the internet as a tool to get rid of the book, so to go more online and go away from the books. Is that a good idea?
It is a great opportunity, but honestly speaking, I have to say it's better for elder students. So students who know how to organize the way of working. Because when you have primary school students, they need a book as a basis for learning, because then they know how to organize and how the book's organized, so they simply feel safe. And the parents simply feel safe, because in primary school, it's still the parents who help the students. I also teach in a language school. I do language courses, and then my students who are older had no problems with any online resources I found on the internet, and that was a great opportunity because I sent them the materials and they could use online materials. So it was better for the environment, no paper wasted.
So it's a kind of an ecological thing at the same time, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so the
Definitely.
internet is, what about the teachers? Because we know age ranges. Let's say you and I are both young men, but we know there are older teachers. Did they find this difficult at the time?
At the beginning, yes, but then because in our school we had to do it, they had no other choice but to learn how to use Zoom and online platforms. So they got used to it. Simply. Of course, we had some problems with equipment, with the internet connections, but that's natural when it comes to online learning. But then I think even the elderly teachers here in the school managed to do what they were supposed to do. Of course, the lessons were not as creative as they would be normally. The question is, are they creative? I don't know how the teachers teach in the school, but then the students said that very often it happened that teachers did not care that much. So they did what they were supposed to do. So exercise 1, 2, 3, close your books, open your books, and then you have no contact with the people who are outside or on the other side of the screen, apart from the fact that you are talking to them, and then you can control what they are saying. And when it comes to Polish, arts, mathematics, probably it is more difficult than just teaching English.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Because you said a very interesting thing that when you have older kids, they can be more organized. Now, the problem begins with online teaching when you're talking about people or kids, let's say between 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old. How do we do? Is it even possible to use online to teach languages to such young children?
Well, it was possible, but probably the effects were not as high as we expected. Last year I didn't teach the youngsters, so the younger students were 5th graders. So 5th graders are about 10 years old or 11. I even
More or
know
less.
that.
More or less.
More or less. And they were pretty okay. But then we based the program on the book. So they felt safe with the book, and we were doing the questions and, describing pictures, a little bit of grammar. So with Zoom, it's easy to write all those forms on the shared screen. When it comes to younger students, I have to say probably that the results were not as they expected, because now this year I'm teaching 4th graders, and to be honest, I have a problem with the basic verbs, so to be, to have. So it means that half a year of lockdown didn't bring anything to their brains somehow.
Wow.
So I have to start from the very basic line. So to be, have got, the verb can, plural forms. So it's going to be a tough year this year.
Did the lockdown have any effect on students? Because now they came back to school, but they were out of school for at least half a year. Even the older students, I mean, do you see any differences between their behavior?
First of all, concentration. They cannot concentrate on the lesson because they are thinking about, I don't even know what, but they are not thinking about the lesson at all. They are more interested in conversating between themselves, so having little conversations and chats, not listening to what the teacher is saying. And the problem is the teachers want to cover up what has been missed out. So it's difficult because the material is huge and they don't care that much. So I've heard opinions that, it would be good if we had lockdown again and we start education online, but they are happy probably from the social point of view. And we will see what it comes out of it. What comes out of it, actually.
Okay, so that covers the lockdown part. So let's now talk about multilingualism. Jacek, you as a multilingual, you see the benefits of it. How do school children actually understand why knowing different languages can push people forward in life, from your perspective, when you talk with young people?
Actually, young people learn English and other languages because their parents want them to learn. So they are too young to understand that without English and without knowing any foreign languages, it's going to be hell difficult in future time. So I've been working in the school for like 13 years, so that's bad luck. Maybe next year it's not going to be like that. But I'm also going into those Erasmus projects. And we have already finished one that was called Blue Countries. Now we are starting another one which is connected to science and music. And I do encourage students to take part in such programs. Why? Because this is the only way to prove them that English is really important, because with English they can communicate with other students their age from different countries. They can see how the education is working in different countries. And actually, when my students come back from those trips, let's call them mobilities, they then understand that, okay, it's good to learn English or any other language because then I can communicate with other people. Because without it, they're like, like finger in a socket. They don't know what to do, how to behave, how to respond, anything. So this is what we do. We also try to cooperate with many organizations which, have to deal with some students, like with ISEC. And then there were some students coming and talking about the countries, of course, in English, to make them aware of the fact that English is important. And I, myself, tell my students that actually after 8 years of learning in our school, the only subject worth learning is English, because this is the only thing they are going to need, because they know Polish and they communicate in Polish. Mathematics, okay, it's important because there's an exam, but if you learn enough to pass the exam, you can end your story with mathematics somehow. But English, this is something that's going to be around them all the time.
So as you can see, we're also a part of an Erasmus Plus project. So you work, and again, COVID has affected these things very much. I mean,
Yes.
You were talking about mobilities. Mobilities now can only be mobile. Is it possible to be mobile on mobility? I mean, that's an oxymoron, but.
You know, it's like, you know, doing some activities like playing football without the ball, yeah, so it's impossible somehow. So mobility for me is only when the teachers and the students travel and have contact with other people. Because if you do it online, well, we can talk right now, but how effective is it? It's just a conversation. But I don't know your feelings, you don't know my feelings. I'm talking some things, you are asking some questions, but there's no real contact. So this is just a conversation. If you go for mobility, and my students who are in primary school, they have to stay in the host family and be there for the whole day, ask about breakfast, ask about shower, tell that they are not feeling very well. So this is something that is real and something that can be experienced. Otherwise, it's just talking. So it's like, you know, like I'm a teacher, so I need to train myself, and I use those webinars. But sorry to say so, but those webinars are a piece of crap, because there are some teachers who are said to be experts and they are telling how to teach. And generally, how can they tell me what I'm supposed to do? I've been doing my job for a long period of time, and I more or less know the methods, and I can adapt the methods to different classes. And if there's somebody who calls himself an expert or a coach, and he tells me online that, oh, I need to do ice-breaking activities on the first lesson, that's bullshit and a waste of time for me. But if I go to a training, which is a workshop, so I do something with my own hands, then it's more effective than just a lecture.
Exactly. We learn by doing, right? I mean, it's just like driving a car. You can go to and learn about how cars function, that you should put your gear into first gear, then second gear. But if you don't do it, then it's not going to be effective. And since Erasmus, we're talking about Erasmus, and what we've been focusing on is multiculturalism. That's what I miss most of all right now, is traveling and interacting with other cultures. Because I think that interculturalism right now in a globalized world is a phenomenon that is here to stay. And I'm a bit afraid that because of the pandemic, we're going to be locked in our bubbles again, and we're going to start fearing other cultures, and this might have negative consequences on young people. So how much is multiculturalism important to these young school children? Are they aware that multiculturalism is important, that it's needed?
Oh, well, it first of all depends on what the parents tell them. Because if the parents tell them that it's important to travel, then they will travel and try to understand that traveling broadens the mind and that multiculturalism is a good thing. If they don't travel and they keep and if they stay at home, then they will just become a little bit narrow-minded, I have to say. And it will be difficult for them to understand in the future that there are different cultures existing somewhere behind Polish borders. And I think it might have a negative effect on the students, like with everything. Yes? If you don't do something, then you don't know how it tastes. Or if you don't try something, you don't know how it tastes. I also miss my friends from different countries. Yes, now I can, what can I do? I can chat with them on Messenger, send some photos, and that's that. But if we meet together and we talk, exchange ideas, that's a different story totally. Yes.
You see, because
so I hope it's not going to be like that, that we are going to be locked down in Poland forever, and but it might on the other
but it might. I'm interested in your take on bilingualism. Do you think that bilingual children, which come from mixed parentage, so mother is Polish, father is French, whatever, is that an asset for being bilingual and bicultural? Or in the mind of a child, is that stopping? Can that point to aggression where other kids are saying, well, let's say you're not completely Polish, And you know what I'm trying to say. This kind of approach
I know,
that young children
and
have.
we had in our school, and I had some dealings with such children. And from the linguistic perspective, I have to say that's the best thing that can happen to a young person, that he goes or she goes somewhere and is able to speak, for example, English fluently. But then from this social point of view, I have to say that children are cruel. And if somebody knows this English or any other language like German or Spanish, because we do teach those languages in our school, and he knows them better, then it's a cause of jealousy for other students, and they just pick him out. And they don't like him or her. They wouldn't like him or her to utter anything during the lessons. So that's the cruelty of children. They don't understand that it's not, they know something because they learn, but because they simply know it.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because my son has friends which have mixed parentage, and well, at least he's been brought up with respect for other cultures because he likes other cultures. But we know that there is a problem right now across Europe where we're trying to again divide instead of connect again.
Unite, exactly.
Unite, exactly. And this is one of the problems that I think we will have to be dealing with as a trend in the future. So you say that thankfully, at least at your school, you don't see much of this yet, but it is a fact. But it is a fact that we have to fight with. And so migrant children, that's another problem, because I don't think we have that many. I mean, in your school, there aren't many migrant children at this time,
Yeah,
right?
some of them, but they're pretty adapted to the school and accepted.
Accepted. So what were, when they first came to the school, what were their biggest problems with integration?
Probably the skin color, I have to say, because in my class, I had a class long time ago, and I had a guy who was of Hindu origin. So he was a little Indian, and he had a sister as well. And Amar was a great guy. He was speaking very good English. He even won some kind of competition. Then his parents were okay, but then he had difficulty to integrate because he was the other kid. So he was, different skin color, different food, because he was Hindu, but not a Catholic Hindu, but a Muslim. So another thing was that he was eating different things than other children. So he never went to the canteen to eat what the school provided for lunch. So he always had his own meals. The same came with the field trips. He always took a little backpack with his food, and he prayed 5 times a day. And that was different for other children. And actually, he was one of the guys that I took on a trip to Turkey, because we had Erasmus then, and he went with us to Turkey. And it turned out that he knew a lot of cultural things connected with, Muslim religion, and he could prove that it's just a religion and it's not a way to kill heaven somehow. So then, because of that, they simply integrated. But it was after the Erasmus, so another plus and big hooray for Erasmus here.
So from what does it mean to you? I mean, how would you, if I were somebody who didn't know anything, you'd have to explain to a parent, what is bilingualism? Or multilingualism?
Multilingualism is being able to speak more than just your mother tongue in such a way that you can be understood and you understand other people. So me being a parent as well and speaking English pretty well, I have to say, I'm not humble here, but I'm an English teacher, or teacher of English. We decided also to smuggle a little bit of English to our son. He's 4 years old. So we sing little songs like Little Finger, Tap, 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 or he knows colors. So for example, the cottage cheese for him is not biały serek, it's serek white. So it's not biały, it's white. So colors, he goes with English names, not Polish. And I'm very happy about that. I don't know how teaching English is done in his kindergarten, but I hope that he has a little basis for a proper start into learning careers.
Into learning careers. Do we teach, I mean, do ours, because we're talking about English classes, French classes, how much do we actually focus on English culture in those classes? Is there any time for that, or because the school curriculum is so filled up for the exam that we don't have time to teach about culture?
To be honest, there is time, and that's a sad thing I have to say. When I started working here in my school, we did a lot of culture. We had history clubs, we had culture clubs, we did smuggle culture during the lessons. The students wanted to listen to that. Now, after 13 years, they are bored with it. They
Really?
don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to anything connected with culture. If you ask basic things, the Queen, the Beatles, Shakespeare, Agatha Christie, they open their mouth and they have no idea what I am talking about. And then you try to explain, but you see in their faces and in their eyes that there's empty field there. You just wonder whether it's okay to do it or not. I myself did history course during my teaching career here. So in 8th grade, we had a week or two in which I was delivering some lectures connected with British history. And then we had a little test. That this was easy, A, B, C, D, but it was just basic facts that we had, the Celts and then the Normans, and then Henry had 6 wives, not 8, and that Elizabeth I and things like that. And then they liked it long time ago. Now, they don't want to listen about it. They think it's boring. And that's sad because I miss that part in my teaching.
It goes to show you how our culture and our mentality is changing, that the children of today are not exactly the children of that we were, right? So
yeah.
I don't know how we should proceed, because I know there's the generational gap, and there's always been this generational gap. But I have a feeling that there's a much larger generational gap between the way we were thinking about languages, cultures, identity coming together than the new generations, which are now, again, divided over social media again. So how do we even go, how do you do it? How do you find some contact with these students where they're so different than you?
They are. I try to be nice, that's the first thing. And I do try to talk to them and explain to them basic stuff. I know that they are social freaks as well, and when it comes to mobiles as well. So we are doing those Kahoots, and I try to promote history or culture through Kahoots, or geography, history, culture, films, music, and then I try to explain certain things. But in the past, for example, I used to do those penguin readers. So every month there was a little book for them to read. They were supposed to read it, and we discussed that. And that was the basic classical examples of, American and British literature. Now they don't do it because they say, sir, we have so many things to do, we have no time to read. And I just ask myself, how can you have no time to read? So basically, I'm very sorry, but long time ago, when the school was not as big as it is now, when we had smaller classes and fewer students, the students were more, I would say, doable, and they were more happy to work with you. So I had those, first places, second places in competitions. Now to get somebody who is good enough to take part in competition is very difficult task.
That's scary. That's scary.
It is.
Because,
but I'm honest with you, so
that's honesty. That's absolutely true. I mean, because we in these projects, and when we get together, we discuss certain things. We think that they might work, and it's good to talk to somebody who is in the field, and actually has to do. So I completely agree with you that the more we discuss, the more we come up with different strategies, and do not consult people like you what it actually is, instead of saying, this is what you should do. You have to do this because I'm smart. I'm the guy at the top of the ladder. I think we should have more open dialogue with people actually taking part in the process of teaching.
But nobody cares about teachers, because in our system nobody cares about teachers. We are supposed to do what we are supposed to do. So there is the core curriculum, and we have to deal with it. So the only positive aspect of not working in a public school is that I don't care. about curriculum, and I do what I want to do during my lessons. So we do have the books, but I try to choose my own methods of teaching and the materials. So we do books and we do some repetitorias as well, because there's the exam. But I decided that I'm not going to just, cover myself or just be in this repetitorium and do nothing apart from that. So I try to do two-way teaching. In 8th graders, I do the extension. So we are doing the B2 level, and then the summaries and repetitorium, so that's that. But another thing that came to my mind when we talked about Erasmus is that when I started with Erasmus, it was 2010, so a long time ago, 10 years ago, I had a project which combined 16 countries, and that was whole Europe practically. And then everybody wanted to go somewhere, wanted to do something. We are good friends with those teachers, and generally it was great experience. And this project, which just finished in 2020, I had problems to gather 20 students who would like to go for an exchange. So in the past, there were so many of them that I could select the best. Now I took everybody who volunteered because nobody wanted to go. And I was surprised, how is it possible? That's a great opportunity, yes, to go, to meet, to experience, but nobody wanted to go.
Wow.
And that was a shock for me, actually.
It's becoming quite a shock for everybody. That's why I think that we need to completely change our attitude and approach to fostering culture and intercultural communication, because this one is obviously not working for this generation. So we have a new generation who's coming in, and they are being brought up digitally. That might cause a complete shock over the next couple of years, because we really don't know what kind of students you will have in 5 years.
Yes.
Which
I'm
means
afraid
that
about that a little bit, but
yeah, but you will then have to adapt. You will then have to change again. So, so do you think that parents should play an important role in fostering their linguistic development? Can parents, in a way, from these multilingual families help you as a teacher? Can they assist you in teaching the language?
yes, I even experimented with that when I had this Amar in my class, and his mother, she was speaking very good English. She came to my classes and had conversations with the students. So that was a great help, because then it was non-native speaker, but still a speaker of English, and it was not me. Because, when it's me, the kids are used to, or they know that if they don't know something, they can always ask in Polish, and then I would probably answer. I try not to do it and talk only in English, but sometimes, you have a better day, a worse day, you are tired more or less, and then just answer and say, okay. But she didn't care. She didn't know Polish, so she was only speaking English and Hindu, so she could either answer in English or in Hindu. Yes, so this is
we did the same. Yeah, I know we did the same.
It's a great experience.
It
and
is.
It's not only about, it's that you have to show parents that school is a special place where teachers are not there to torture the students. We are here to help the students accommodate. And I had the previous class I was a head teacher of, they were pretty naughty, I have to say. And it was difficult to lead any lessons with them. And I told to the parents that I have such a problem. And I said, well, it's my problem, so generally I have to deal with it. And I said, no, it's not my problem, it's also your problem. So I have this one lesson a week, 1 hour, which is this hour for the teacher. So I invited those parents one by one for this wychowawcza lesson, so the hour of the teacher. I said, okay, do what you want to do. You can talk about your job, you can talk about your hobby, about sports, but you lead the lesson and see how difficult it is to get through those students. And then the feedback was, Panie Jacku, you have all our support right now because we just understood what you were talking about. So that was the way. Now probably it will be more difficult because the parents are very demanding, I have to say, and they want everything to be done, but not to include parents, which is another sad story from the school yard. Parents don't care anymore, they just demand.
Well, what we have just heard is a man who is actually working with your children, and the man that you should respect for all the hard work that he's doing. We've actually covered a lot during this interview. I mean, I learned myself, and I think that COVID is just an excuse for humans to say, let's take it easy, let's not do certain things. I think this is the time where we should really step up to our core values, to our European values, and maintain normality. Because if it's not going to be for people like you, like many others working in the field, then these children's future is bleak. So I would like to thank you for your hard work and for all you've done, and continue.
Well, it's just my job. I generally get paid for that. Yes, maybe not the great amount of money, but still a little bit.
So it's good that we still have some bit of ideals left there deep down within us. But yes, so ladies and gentlemen, what we've been trying to talk about: multilingual children, multicultural children. People aware of that are going to be the future generations that they are going to make this world grow up. If we do not invest in them, in their tolerance, in their understanding of cultures and difference, then there's nothing left to say. Then let's just pack our bags and go home, because there's nothing left.
We'll find ourselves in deep mud from which there's no way out, actually.
From which there is no way out. Jacek, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for talking to you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking part in this series of webinars.